The zero-gravity dining chamber hovered above the gas giant like a suspended jewel, its alloy framework shimmering under the soft golden glow of the summit lights. Holographic banners announced, "Galactic Summit. Unity in Diversity," their iridescent glow reflecting off polished tables. Alien delegates filled the space, avian with feathered crests, crystalline beings refracting light, gelatinous entities forming ripples of color. They all watched her, and Alara Voss watched them back. Her fingers traced the edge of her plate, feeling the cool alloy beneath her palm. Every diplomat present was smiling politely, yet she could sense the subtle currents of resentment and suspicion. The Zyrexians, humanoid but with translucent skin revealing veins pulsing with bioluminescent toxins, were particularly tense. Their reputation for lethal elegance was well earned. She lifted her wine glass, noting the faintest shimmer on its rim. Her instincts screamed, poison. The gesture had been too precise, the glint too deliberate. The liquid inside was deadly, tailored for her physiology, a cocktail that could stop her heart in seconds. Alara's heartbeat slowed. She was human, often underestimated, but years of training had prepared her for this. Nanotech within her bloodstream activated automatically, neutralizing the toxin before it could reach her vital organs. She tilted the glass gracefully, drank the rest, and set it down as if nothing had happened. The Zyrexian assassin across the table's cyan eyes flickered, expecting panic. There was none. Only calm. Only calculation. The assassin's veins pulsed brighter, an involuntary tell. They began moving subtly, slipping a retractable blade from their sleeve, aiming to strike unnoticed. Alara's eyes tracked the motion in slow, precise focus. Time stretched. Zero gravity played to her advantage. She shifted the local gravity fields with a discreet wrist motion, tugging at the assassin's footing. Her hand darted to a concealed button at her thigh. A microprojectile shot out, piercing the Zyrexian's shoulder. The alien hissed, a flash of pain running through its bioluminescent veins. Gasps rippled across the chamber as other delegates noticed the disruption. Alara didn't flinch. She leaned forward, letting the subtle momentum of zero-G make her movements fluid, almost feline. With her other hand, she drew a sleek, hidden blade. One swift motion, and the assassin collided with the far wall, stunned. The weapon had struck a nerve cluster, temporarily paralyzing them. Aliens murmured, some recoiling in fear, some intrigue. Alara straightened, adjusting her gown as if dusting imaginary crumbs. "Diplomatic etiquette," she said lightly, her voice carrying across the chamber, "requires one to finish their meal." The Zyrexian's eyes widened in disbelief. They surged toward her with renewed aggression, but Alara sidestepped effortlessly. One precise strike to the central nervous node ended the threat. The veins dimmed, the pulse of life fading. Silence enveloped the room. She returned to her seat as though nothing had happened, picking up her untouched dessert. Whispers cascaded through the chamber. Security personnel rushed forward, only to be waved back. Alara's gaze swept the room, calm yet commanding. Every alien delegate now understood one immutable truth. Humans were not to be underestimated. She allowed herself a small, private smirk. Humans survived where others would fall. Humans adapted, improvised, and when pushed to the edge, executed the impossible. The summit resumed, the previous tension transformed into cautious respect. Eyes lingered on her, calculating, reassessing. She sipped the remaining champagne with deliberate serenity. Alara Voss, human diplomat, warrior, and predator, had survived an assassination attempt in front of the galaxy's most dangerous species. And she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Humans, underestimated though they were always dangerous. As the chamber hummed with alien discourse, her mind already raced ahead, planning, anticipating. She would need every ounce of her ingenuity for the challenges yet to come. But for now, she had won, not just survival, but dominance. The humans at the summit would be remembered. The Zyrexians would not soon forget. And Alara? She finished her meal with the composure of someone who had already tasted death and returned with a smile. The aftermath of the attempted assassination lingered like a silent storm. Whispers echoed through the corridors of the orbital summit station, eyes darting nervously toward Ilara Voss. Humans had survived, and worse, they had fought back. The mere thought unsettled even the most composed alien dignitaries. Ilara moved through the hall with measured grace, her elegant gown brushing lightly against the polished alloy floor. Every step was deliberate. She scanned every corner, every reflection, every shimmer in the lights above. The Zyrexian assassin had been neutralized, but she knew there were others, silent hunters lurking in the shadows, observing, waiting. Her comlink buzzed. She touched the discreet earpiece. "Report," she said, voice low, controlled. "All security drones in the sector are operational, Commander," replied her assistant. "Sensors indicate multiple unidentified movement patterns outside the public areas. Likely reconnaissance units, not direct threats yet." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "Reposition them. Feed me live updates. And alert me if anyone approaches within 20 meters." She continued down the hall, her mind calculating possibilities. The aliens might attempt another strike, perhaps during the next banquet, or even in her private quarters. Humans were underestimated everywhere, but the real danger was underestimation combined with malice. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. A soft hum ran through the floor, almost imperceptible. Ilara froze, sensing it before she saw it, the telltale signature of a cloaked presence moving with precision. The air itself seemed to bend around the intruder. Before the alien could strike, she was already moving. Gravity shifted subtly, and her body twisted in zero-G with predatory fluidity. One hand reached for a micrograpple gun hidden in her sleeve, firing a cable that snagged the intruder's wrist. The figure struggled, its bioluminescent veins flaring briefly before dimming. Ilara yanked it into view. Another Zyrexian, leaner, faster, and even more lethal than the last. Its mouth opened, attempting to hiss a toxin, but she was already on top of it, pinning it against the polished wall. "You're persistent," she said, her voice calm, almost casual, but carrying steel beneath the surface. "But humans adapt." With a flick of her wrist, a tiny device activated on the assassin's suit, sending a pulse that paralyzed its limbs. The alien flailed for a moment before going completely still. Ilara stepped back, surveying the hall. Not a sound from the surrounding security drones. They had observed, recorded, and remained unobtrusive. "Humans," she muttered under her breath, letting a small, private smile curl her lips. "Always dangerous." Her comlink buzzed again. "Commander, sensor sweep indicates another unauthorized presence in the West Wing. Possibly a decoy or a scout." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "Understood. I'll handle it. Prepare countermeasures." She moved with silent precision down the corridor, every step, every shift of weight, a calculated maneuver. Shadows stretched along the walls, but she was the predator now. The summit station, gleaming and seemingly peaceful, was a hunting ground, and she knew it. The humans around her might have appeared fragile, polite, and unassuming, but in reality, they thrived in chaos, adapted to danger, and could turn a death trap into an advantage. Every alien who had doubted them would soon learn the cost of underestimation. Ilara paused at the intersection, listening. Footsteps, soft, deliberate. She adjusted the gravity fields beneath her boots subtly, tilting the intruder's balance before it could make a move. One final calculated step, and the figure stumbled into view. A smirk formed on her lips. Another would-be assassin, another miscalculation. And another lesson learned by the galaxy. Humans were predators, and Ilara Voss was at the forefront. She pressed the intruder against the wall again, this time keeping a hand on its throat, enough to restrain, not kill. "Try that again," she whispered, "and I won't be so polite." The alien's veins dimmed in surrender. Around her, the station's ambient lights reflected off polished walls, casting a serene golden glow. But beneath that calm, the tension pulsed like a heartbeat. Humans had survived, humans had fought back, and humans had dominated. Elara allowed herself a brief exhale. The summit would continue, but she knew the game had changed. Humans were no longer underestimated, and she intended to make sure they never were again. The grand banquet hall shimmered under a cascade of ambient lights, holographic banners reflecting in the polished alloy floor. Floating platforms in zero-G carried exotic dishes, crystalline fruits, protein spheres, alien delicacies, but all eyes were on Elara Voss. Her calm composure and serene smile belied the storm of calculation within her mind. Security drones hovered unobtrusively, blending into the architecture, their sensors sweeping the crowd. Elara knew better than to rely on them entirely. The Zyrexians were cunning, using subtleties and shadows, testing humanity's limit. Tonight they would try again. A ripple of movement near the east platform caught her attention. A Zyrexian assassin, cloaked in a refractive suit that bent light and hid form, moved silently through the crowd. Its intent was clear: strike the human diplomat during a moment of vulnerability. Elara's blue eyes narrowed. Humans were underestimated, yes, but never unprepared. A subtle motion of her fingers activated microgravity shifts around her seat. She floated up, twisting gracefully through the air as if performing a dance, simultaneously keeping the assassin in her sights. The alien struck, blade shimmering in the ambient light. Elara moved, zero-G giving her unnatural agility. She caught the blade with her bare hand, feeling the vibration of energy coursing through it. Pain would have come to a normal human, but she was enhanced, quick, precise, and utterly unpredictable. With a deft spin, she used the assassin's momentum against it, hurling the alien across the hall. The blade clattered harmlessly against a table. Delegates gasped, some frozen in shock, others scrambling away. Elara landed elegantly on a floating platform, her gaze scanning for further threats. Another figure emerged, a duo this time, using coordinated movements to flank her. Elara smiled faintly. Predictable, but dangerous. Not enough to stop a human. She adjusted the gravity field subtly around the attackers, disrupting their balance. One stumbled into a floating dessert tray, the other crashed against a holographic banner. Elara advanced with zero hesitation. Her movements were poetry in motion, quick, calculated, lethal if necessary. She didn't need to kill. Control was the point. One precise strike to the first alien's central nervous cluster immobilized it. A microelectric pulse rendered the second unconscious. The crowd watched, silent and stunned. Aliens whispered urgently among themselves. Humans were fragile, they had believed, but fragile humans could dominate. They could improvise. They could fight. They could turn deadly even in the most impossible circumstances. Elara adjusted her gown, dusting off imaginary crumbs as if she were merely continuing her meal. Her voice, calm and clear, carried across the hall. Dinner is best enjoyed without interruptions. A ripple of disbelief ran through the audience. Security drones secured the neutralized assassins, but none dared intervene further. Elara's mastery had sent a clear message. Humans were predators in any environment, and she was the apex among them. Yet she knew the summit was far from over. Tonight was a warning. A human had survived, not just once but repeatedly, and turned every attempt on its head. The galaxy would take notice. Humans were dangerous, unpredictable, and terrifying when cornered. Elara returned to her seat, lifted her glass with serene composure, and sipped. Around her, the summit hall buzzed with a mixture of fear, awe, and grudging respect. One thing was certain: humans were no longer to be underestimated, and Elara Voss, human, diplomat, and predator, would make sure that truth was remembered. By the time the summit entered its final session, the tension in the orbital chamber was palpable. Aliens no longer merely watched Elara Voss. They studied her, calculated, reconsidered. She had survived 2 assassination attempts, dispatched multiple Zyrexians, and still maintain the elegance and calm of a human diplomat. Elara observed from her elevated seat, the zero-G giving her vantage over the room. Her gown floated lightly around her, a delicate contrast to the lethal precision of her movements. Security drones hovered silently, their sensors sweeping for any disturbance. But Elara didn't need them to detect every subtle anomaly. Her own instincts and tactical awareness were far superior. A sudden shift in the chamber's gravity field signaled the next attack. This time, it wasn't a lone assassin but a coordinated group. Zyrexians, reptilians, and even a few crystalline operatives. They intended a full strike, eliminate the human representative and destabilize the summit in one fell swoop. Elara's eyes narrowed. Humans were underestimated, yes, but humans were predators at heart. She rose gracefully, floating above her table as the first attackers approached. The crowd gasped, their alien physiology ill-suited to rapid zero-G combat. The first Zyrexian lunged with a blade, its bioluminescent veins pulsing furiously. Elara sidestepped effortlessly, using microgravity shifts to fling it into a wall. A crystalline attacker swung a spiked appendage, but she twisted midair, catching it with her bare hand and redirecting the momentum into the floor, sending it sliding harmlessly across the hall. Each movement was precise, calculated, and unflinching. Humans might appear fragile, but in controlled chaos they thrive. Elara dispatched one adversary after another, using zero-G, improvised weapons, and sheer cunning. She didn't need to kill, she needed control, and she had it in spades. Delegates watched in awe and fear. Humans were adaptable, unpredictable, and terrifying when cornered. Elara's serene expression contrasted with the violent ballet unfolding around her. Then came the leader, a Zyrexian commander, larger, faster, and smarter than the rest. Its eyes glowed cyan with deadly intent. Elara met its gaze, unflinching. The room held its collective breath. The commander attacked, a blur of motion. Elara anticipated, twisting, leaping, and using gravity manipulation to throw it off balance. She landed behind it, delivered a disabling strike to its central nerve cluster, and restrained it with a micrograpple. The pulse of life in its veins dimmed, the bioluminescence fading. The hall fell silent. Even the most seasoned delegates could not hide their astonishment. Humans, fragile, underestimated humans, had not only survived a siege but had turned it into a demonstration of lethal precision. Elara floated back to her seat, adjusting her gown as if nothing had occurred. She lifted her glass and spoke, her calm voice carrying over the chamber. Diplomacy works best when all parties respect one another. Humans, like all species, deserve respect, or the consequences of underestimation. Whispers ran through the crowd. The summit had been transformed. Humans were no longer seen as fragile observers. They were predators, capable of dominating when underestimated. Elara allowed herself a small, private smile. Humans had survived, adapted, and emerged victorious, not through brute force alone, but through cunning, ingenuity, and sheer resolve. The galaxy would remember this night, and she, Commander Elara Voss, had ensured it. The summit chamber was quiet now, the echoes of conflict fading into tense anticipation. Delegates whispered among themselves, their calculations and assumptions about humans rewritten in real time. Elara Voss sat poised at the head table, her gown floating elegantly in zero-G, a serene figure against the subdued lighting. Security drones hovered at discrete intervals, but their presence was largely ceremonial. Elara had already neutralized the immediate threat. What remained was the aftermath, political, psychological, and diplomatic. A Zyrexian ambassador, recovering from the failed assassination attempts, approached cautiously. Its glowing veins dimmed in submission, the once confident posture replaced by wary respect. Commander Voss, it began, voice low and deliberate, humans exceed expectations. Elara's eyes met its cyan gaze. Calm, unflinching, resolute. Expectations are a fragile thing, she replied smoothly. Humans survive. Humans adapt. Humans endure. And humans dominate when underestimated. Around the chamber, delegates nodded subtly, some with relief, others with awe. The summit had been preserved, diplomacy maintained, but the hierarchy had shifted. Humans were no longer minor participants, they were a force. Elara rose, floating lightly in zero-G, commanding attention with every motion. She addressed the assembly. Let this be clear. Diplomacy is built on trust, mutual respect, and caution. Underestimating a species, or an individual, can have consequences. Humans are resilient, adaptable, and yes, dangerous when challenged. We ask only for respect, and in return, we offer partnership. The room held its collective breath. Alien leaders exchanged glances, silent calculations passing between them. Even the most skeptical knew that the summit's balance of power had changed. Humans were not just participants, they were players to be reckoned with. Elara descended gracefully, returning to her seat. Her mind was already running ahead, anticipating further political maneuvers, potential threats, and opportunities to solidify humanity's position in the galaxy. Humans had survived attempts on her life, a coordinated strike, and public humiliation disguised as diplomacy, and emerged victorious. A junior human aide approached, quietly handing her a new datapad. Elara's gaze flicked over the information. Reports of intercepted communications, intelligence on alien factions reconsidering strategies, and confirmations that humans were now being treated with cautious respect across multiple sectors. She allowed herself a faint, private smile. Humans had been underestimated, and now the galaxy would remember. The summit resumed with renewed energy, but the atmosphere had shifted irrevocably. Where there had been subtle disdain, now there was respect. Where there had been doubt, now there was calculation. Humans were not just survivors. Humans were innovators, strategists, and warriors when cornered. Elara lifted her glass one final time, her serene expression masking the pride and satisfaction beneath. To humans, she murmured under her breath, may we always be underestimated until it's too late. Outside the summit chamber, the orbital station gleamed against the swirling storms of the gas giant below. Humanity had marked its place in the galaxy, not with intimidation, but with skill, cunning, and resilience. The galaxy would remember Commander Elara Voss, and through her, the dangerous, unpredictable, unstoppable species that was human. And in that moment, humans were not just a presence in the galaxy, they were a legacy.